in cannabis marketplace, we have passionate entrepreneurs who never, ever expected to be business owners in their life. And we have the world's most insane regulatory system. I think there are two things on the planet that are more heavily regulated than semi-legal cannabis today: plutonium and weapons of war.
That's
Here
a strange category to put cannabis into.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
Welcome back to another installment of the Perspective Podcast. My name is Devon. We're missing my co-host Mitch Harley again today. He is a busy, busy man, but that's okay. We're going to make up for it in the amazing conversation that we're going to have today with Melissa Rutherford. Am I saying that right?
You are.
Okay, perfect. Because I bumble through these names and introductions every single time. I promise the conversation is going to be much better than this. Melissa, you are in the world of cannabis, which is a new frontier, and the fact that we're even having a conversation about it right now really speaks to how quickly the landscape of business is shifting right underneath our very toes. And I'd love to explore some of this with you. But before we do, let's start with a bit of a background on who you are, where you came from, and how did you end up in this mess of things?
So, hi. As you said, name's Melissa. I have spent an inordinate amount of time working in risk management and compliance. And I have done it in three unique industries, not including cannabis, which are electronic waste, reverse supply chain, and environmentalism, fast fashion, and footwear, specifically sneakers. I have had the great luxury and pleasure and privilege to audit in person on every continent on the globe that doesn't have penguins.
That's great.
And I have met some very amazing people and seen some very amazing things. All of that put me in a very interesting niche position that when a recruiter knocked on my door, if you will, or called me on my computer in my pocket, I actually was able to really fill a niche in the cannabis marketplace because of my wide background and experience on a global basis. And that is how, very tightly, short story of how I ended up in cannabis. I was headhunted for it. I will tell you that my guidance counselor in both high school and college would be appalled. I was a goody two shoes. I was not cannabis was my group of friends did not run with that. For all that I was a theater kid, it was not. We were all alcoholics for the most part. My college experience was very, very traditional alcoholism. Let's see how fatty that liver we can go. And this wasn't anything I was personally aware of. I had friends who did it, but it wasn't anything I did with. And so the recruiter says, "Hi, I'd like to talk to you. Are you open for a conversation?" Blah, blah, blah. Yep, I am. Great. It's a job in Massachusetts. Oh, well, fabulous. I live in Massachusetts. I'm working every other week in Atlanta, Georgia. I don't really love Georgia. It doesn't have an ocean. It's very hot. I'm from New England. I like certain things. And so we're talking there. Need somebody with regulatory experience who understands, changing regulations, who understands how to audit and can write standard operating procedures. And I'm like, check. Yeah, I got these boxes. Okay. What's the catch? Like, you're not telling me certain things. What's the catch? And she says, well, are you aware that Massachusetts has legalized cannabis? And I was like, yeah. She says, well, it's for a cannabis organization. And I was like, oh, tell me more. And that turned into an interview with the CEO, who was very much, I don't know anything about compliance. I don't know anything about regulations. I just want to run this business for this plant that I'm passionate about. And I need somebody to make sure that I can get my license and I can maintain my license. And that requires all of these things in a risk management and compliance enterprise. And I was like, sold, done. I said, I have one question. And he said, yes. And I said, I don't know anything about cannabis. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I've never seen a plant. I mean, I understand it's legal. I understand it's mood altering. outside of, and I understand it's very apparently scary. I said, other than that, I don't understand a thing. And he said, oh, is that like your biggest worry? And I was like, yeah, definitely my biggest worry. And his response was, I can teach you anything you need to know about cannabis. I don't want to know anything about compliance except we meet it. And I was like, sold. So I got to tell my bosses that I was moving back to New England and I was not going to relocate to Atlanta, Georgia, which I think was probably for the best for all of us involved. And I came back, and the very first time I set foot into the facility, which was not yet done being built, and I met the head cultivator at the time, I said to him, I said, so when you say flower, how do you spell that? And he looked at me for a minute, and he looked at me and he said, how do you spell it? And I said, Flour. And he about tripped over his own feet in the hallway because he was laughing at me so hard. And he was like, no, oh, you're going to be fun, was his response. Spent the next 4 years working for a licensor, duly licensed, setting up a compliance and risk management program, getting through audits, all of that good stuff. And suddenly coming to know this really wildly amazing and cool plant that, due to some serious racist issues, has been pretty much suppressed for the past 100 years, roughly, give or take.
Yeah.
5 years on either side, as a rough estimate. 2 weeks after I started the job, I got a phone call. Your grandmother is dying. She's going home for hospice. Do you want to go visit? Yes, I want to go visit. When is available? So I went down on a Saturday, and she had throat cancer. She was in fact, when I was a little girl, she was a pipe smoker of all things. And she
different
had quit.
times back then.
Very different times back then.
Yeah.
You know, she quit, but this is not a surprise. She was 92 years old. She had an incredible life. So I have experienced a lot of hospital rooms and I've attended more funerals than weddings in my life, which is not a goal for most people. And so I've seen some intense situations, and I was not excited to spend hospice with someone, but it was important to me. I was her eldest grandchild. You know, this was important. And so I went down, and it wasn't the same as any other experience had been. There were no machines. She did have a hospital bed set up in the living room for ease of going to bed, like it could lower and raise. There were no drips. There was nobody hovering. It was just her family, and she was in a fairly good mood. It was, in fact, she loved golf, was a huge Tiger Woods fan, and it was, in fact, the day he won his last tournament. So she couldn't talk because of the cancer, but we were hanging out. And I was like, what the hell is going on? This is not what I expected. And my uncle pats me on the shoulder and he says, sweetheart, medical cannabis. And I was like, what? It was life-changing end of life experience for her, I'm sure, but for me, because I could talk to her. She couldn't talk to me, but I could talk to her, and she could nod her head, and she gestured with her hands as I do. I didn't pick it up from the ground. I could tell her that I loved her, and she heard me. It wasn't guessing. It wasn't wondering. There weren't nurses and doctors doing this thing, right? It was a warm, open experience. Cancerous end of lives can be very rough on the families because cancer treatments tend to make people not hungry, or they can't keep food down. She was eating. She wasn't eating a lot, but she looked healthy. She didn't have that emaciated Hollywood death look, if you will. And I had a conversation with her. I had a day's worth of a conversation with her. And at one point in time, my aunt, who was her main caretaker, said to me, your grandmother's taking a nap. I'm going out. And I was like, where are you going? Where are you going? She said, I'm going to kickboxing class. I need some exercise. And I was like, all right, I get that. I said, okay, what do I do? She said, if your grandmother wakes up, if she needs to go to the bathroom, help her, blah, blah, blah. and her medicine is in the fridge. And I went, okay. I said, what do I do? She said, just give her, it was a tincture. It was a cannabis tincture. Just give her, just give her one squeeze. And I was like, okay, that's technical. What the hell? So my aunt goes off. My grandmother's napping. I'm kind of like, okay, what am I going to do? So I went to read the information on the boxes because, I was working in cannabis. This would be kind of cool. Was there any packaging or information? Nope. None. Great. I am attempting to help my grandmother, and I don't have any reference material. I was like, oh, I can't wait to go home and read these regulations. What the hell? And that, coupled with coming into the industry, has made me passionate about it in a way that I never could have expected. I thought it was just going to be a job. I was going to get to go home. The facility was in Gloucester, Massachusetts. It's absolutely beautiful. If you've never been, it's right on the ocean. It's gorgeous. I was like, this is a job. This is great. And I've become an intense advocate because it makes such a difference. It's huge. Whether it's recreational, it's healthier for you than booze is. If calories are your thing, like, a gummy is a lot less calories than a glass of wine is, let me just tell you. And you can kind of get in the same place and you stay there longer. So you need to refill less. It's like not a bad thing. But especially on the medical side, we are missing something huge, something with the federal illegality and not looking at this and not studying it. It's not scary. It's not even remotely scary.
Yeah, so I come from the other side of that fence. So I was a part of the pit kids, and very, very, very different experience. But what I will tell you is, I had a guidance counselor as well. My experience was very different. Our viewers already know that story, but not to beat a dead horse here. The point I'm trying to make. What I was told when I was younger and going through that experience myself was that I was self-medicating. And so here's the situation that I can paint for you. I also witnessed death many, many times, very, very early in my life, and developed a complex from it and didn't know how to interact with the world as a result. And the people around me didn't have the tools to do it. And so my parents did what they knew to be true and right, and they took me to a doctor, and the doctor did what he was taught to do, which was to give me some chemicals to see what works. And I became a living experiment. Dozens of different prescriptions. None of them did anything. Most of them made me sick. I still have vivid memories of locking myself in the bathroom for half of a day because I literally was keeled over in a bathroom stall. Couldn't function just because of how sick the different drugs that I was on was making me. So I basically told my parents to FO and I was going to handle this on my own. I'm not taking any more of these drugs. And that was when I started self-medicating. So I've had a very different relationship with cannabis. And when the time came, so I did quit. And when I quit smoking, I replaced it with alcohol, which was a much worse journey for me. 12 years an alcoholic, happily clean for many years now. But that resulted for me going back to the original medication that I was using to help control some of the things that I have, ADD, and I guess I'm on the spectrum. I didn't know that, and a few other things. But having that experience and knowing what resolve I was able to achieve just from my own self-dosing, I was also very much an advocate when they started talking about it. And when they first made it legal for only medical, you need a prescription up here in Canada. I was one of the very first few people here in the city to make that, had to be on that list to get that card, to be able to participate in that thing. And thankfully it turned into being legal all the way across the country, which is a godsend because we've seen some incredible transformations. So you, on the other side, had this image, I imagine, like many other people did, of it being it was vilified. It was a very bad, very evil thing. And I know it to be true that that is a result of the good old fashioned marketing engine. Being a cog in that machine myself, I know how powerful it has been in shaping our perceptions of certain things. And so cannabis being one of those things, while you're here, you deserve flowers for the work that you're doing. Kudos, absolutely 100%. I think everybody needs to know how valuable the work that you do is in helping to reshape the way that we look at these things. And it's not just manufactured chemicals that solve the problem. There are many ways to solve the problems, and some of those ways are a little bit more natural, a little bit more healthy, whatever, than others. For example, if you have a proper diet, you can avoid getting diabetes. You see what I'm saying? So there's by making educated choices that are related to the way that we take care of ourselves, we have more ammo. And so that's why I think what you're doing is so admirable. You mentioned a whole lot of things here that I can't wait to rip apart here. The racist thing, the fast fashion footwear thing, and the connection to the racist thing, because I think that there's something there. But the first thing that I think was on the top of my list here was your role as risk management. And I think that that's a really important skill to develop for anybody who is in the world of entrepreneurialism. Anybody who is in a position to be making choices that do have risk, this skill of risk management helps alleviate some of that tension and anxiety and stress that comes along with making a choice that could potentially go wrong. For example, taking out $100,000 loan to start your business. Right. So let's dive into that a little bit. When it comes to risk management and the role that you played in the company that you work for, what primarily was it that you were responsible for?
So like Canada, here in the United States, we have a very heavy regulatory body for cannabis. Some of it is a response to stigma. Some of it is a response to fear mongering. And some of it is we don't know what we don't know. So we're going to put a lot of guardrails on this. So the focus in the Massachusetts market, which is where I've started and I'm now national, but the focus here in Massachusetts and echoed throughout the other legal markets here in the States, because unlike Canada, we haven't gone all of the way across the nation yet, is public health and public safety. So what the community perceives as the risk of a child getting access to cannabis, the risk of driving under the influence of cannabis, the risk of that thing being accessible. Those are heavily regulated against. So in this instance, what it was managing the risks of failure to meet these high bars, which would negate your license. Then within your business, you have the risks of operations. Both of our countries have occupational health and safety standards that we have to meet. We call them slightly different things. They're roughly the same based on my experience. So then you have those processes, risk management. So you're looking at the risks of your employees. How do you make sure that they have the safest operational space possible? How do you make sure you line up with all of these checks and boxes, from your zip code responsibility to your greater municipality to your county, all the way up to your state, and then of course federal, because they're there too, even though we're illegal. And it's putting those pieces together. But when you're talking about risk management as an entrepreneur, when you're looking at your own small business, first thing you have to remember is you cannot eliminate risk. It is physically impossible. If you want to eliminate risk, be dead, because then there's no more risks.
Game over.
There's nothing to do. That risk is inherent in what we do. And that's the way the life works. But what you can do is you can transfer it. Classic transfer is your insurance, right? Like, you pay an insurance company a fee, you drive a car, and then if an accident occurs, they help you negate that, right? They offer, you give them $200 a month or whatever it is, and they then pay for the new vehicle, what have you. So that's a classic transfer, and that's the transfer. You put the risk on somebody else by paying a portion of it. Then you can mitigate it. You can put all your plans into place. So standard operating procedures, good marketing, legal marketing, clear instructions and development, a solid business plan. That's all mitigation practices as an entrepreneur. So you know what you're doing, you know how you want to do it, you make the process repeatable. All of that lowers the risk of your process. So we've got transfer, we've got mitigation, you can't eliminate, and then you can accept your risk. So that's your fourth option, which is, you know that it's awful risky to go get $150,000 loan and you're putting up it against your house, or you're putting it up against your car, or hell, you're taking a line of credit against something you own, and you're going to work really hard on this new thing that you're doing, and you're accepting that risk. And that probably is quite hard. The hardest one is to accept it and make it manageable so you can sleep at night. Gummies will help. But so you're
Shameless
working in that
plug.
It's fine. It works. And you're safe the next morning. And my biggest fear as becoming a cannabis consumer was, especially with young children, like, if I take this, am I going to wake up if somebody's ill? And guess what? Yeah, Mom Dar still works. It's amazing. Sorry, sidebar. So those were what I was looking at, was where could I transfer risk out? What insurance were operationally available? Where could I mitigate the risk through process, procedures, standardization, repeatability? Though that's your big area right there. And then what do we have to accept as risk? We have to accept that we have very limited ability to do certain things: advertise, decorate, design, market. Massachusetts is not very limited in our product lineup, but in some states, the only thing you can make is a gelatinous cube that's flavored peach. And you can't sell flower because smoking's bad.
Right.
So, Massachusetts is comparatively very open. We sell dabs. If you can flavor it, we make it. Somebody put out a line of infused cranberry sauces for Christmas. We have infused ice cream on the markets that you can buy. People sell infused salad dressings in our retail stores. So very open marketplace. Other marketplaces are incredibly, incredibly locked down from that perspective. Or in some cases, in New York, you could only buy pre-ground flour. You couldn't buy like a jar of an eighth. You could only buy ground up flour. And I was like, but people do different things. Like, okay, what? I don't understand that. And then other people want to tax. So the higher the potency, they want to tax you more. So if you're going to buy a 30% flour, we're going to charge you more money for that experience. I'm sorry, you don't charge me any more for the 151 Bacardi. It's still rum, but you're not, The tax? My tax is only based on the fact that it's rum and alcohol. My tax isn't based on the fact that it's 151. So there's a lot of nuances. And it is my experience that in cannabis marketplace, we have passionate entrepreneurs who never, ever expected to be business owners in their life. And we have the world's most insane regulatory system. I think there are two things on the planet that are more heavily regulated than semi-legal cannabis today: plutonium and weapons of war.
That's a strange category to put cannabis into.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah.
If you ever come to visit the city of Boston, you can take a tour of the College of Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. It's across the river. It's the MIT. If you get the right dorm, you have the best view in the city of Boston, let me tell you. My daughter did a college program there. At one point in time, she was 14 years old and I was like, do you know what people pay for this view, kiddo? And you're here for a week for like camp? This is not, I'm staying. You go sleep on the floor. I'm staying here. They teach nuclear engineers. They create nuclear engineers. Nuclear engineers need to practice. So there is a small legal nuclear power plant on the campus of MIT, which is directly across from the State House in the capital city of Boston. You can take the tour, the college tour, and they will stop by the MIT Nuclear Engineering Lab, and you don't get to go see the rods, but you can see the nuclear power plant. I can't put windows in my building because we might harm the children.
Right. Well, and isn't that interesting? And it points back at the marketing machine. And I don't mean the marketing machine in the traditional sense of what most people understand the marketing machine to be. It is not just a magazine page or a Facebook post or a commercial in between Breaking Bad on TV. It's the news that you consume. It's the newspaper itself. It's the radio hosts constantly drilling the same message into you over and over again. We've all seen, well, a lot of us have seen that one video that was circulating very, very top of COVID-19 when all of the news stations that were syndicated under that one news umbrella, they all had a pre-scripted thing, and they started putting all of these videos together, and they're all saying the exact same message to us. The question is where does that message come from? A really good book for people to read, actually. I'm just going to shamelessly plug this one. Trust Me, I'm Lying by Ryan Holiday. It's Confessions of a Media Manipulator. This book changed the way that I saw the entire world. This guy's job was to manipulate the media to provide news coverage as a form of advertising. For example, this low budget movie came out. They spent all their money making the movie, had no money left to market the movie. They called Ryan, gave him their last $10,000. And what Ryan did was he called up a bunch of feminist advocates who were very boisterous at the time about a certain message that they were sharing. And he sent them a few anonymous emails reporting this movie as a bad movie because of one scene that was in the movie. And out of context, that one scene looks really, really bad. And so naturally, those voices took to the streets and spread the message. And it was one of the top grossing movies that year. I can't even remember the movie. It's been a long time since I read the book. That being said, another one that really, really struck me was tobacco companies. And I'm bringing this up because of the correlation between the two. When you said, oh, smoking's bad and this, that, and whatever, it reminded me of the campaign that they ran. Now, this is something that we all must take some time to acknowledge. Most of what we think is happening in the world is only happening because big corporations are at war with each other for your attention and for your money and for whatever else, right? To continue to serve the big capitalist engine. Not that I'm for or against it. What I'm saying is that we just need to acknowledge that that's what's happening. So a big tobacco company does is they advocate for everybody to ban tobacco advertisements on television and on radio and in magazines and newspapers. They fought to ban it. Here's why. They said, you know what, we want to go one step further. If we have to ban the advertising of it, what we should be doing is being proactive. The government should pay to run advertisements, anti-smoking campaigns on television, radio, newspapers, and magazines and all that. Anti-smoking campaigns. You know what they found? That every time that those ads were ran, they saw a spike in revenue.
Yeah.
Now, isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
So here we are with this preconceived notion of what cannabis is, what it has been throughout time, and we're only operating based on information that we were given by a source we believed we could trust because they did a really good job framing themselves as the authority by doing mostly good stuff. But occasionally when you see them put out an article and then they have to redact it and change it, do you go back to the newspaper and read the redactions and try to correct no, you now you got the headline, you run with that headline is true. And we've seen this play out en masse and on social media now. And there was a huge fight against that. And so when it comes to your challenge in the world of cannabis, in trying to reshape the way that we see this, what is your approach to that? Is that part of the function that the part of the role that you play?
Absolutely.
So what is it?
Uh,
What is it that you see the biggest challenges that you're trying to overcome here? Then in reframing the message that people need to understand when it comes to cannabis.
if I am speaking to someone outside of the cannabis industry
Mhm.
and they are asking me why I do what I do and what I'm doing, I explain to them that what they think they know about cannabis is probably really not true. And that if they if they are interested, that they can take a walk through a local store. Hell, I'll go with them.
Mm.
And they can talk to someone. My mom is a retired RN. So let's talk about serious level of indoctrination that marijuana is bad.
Mm.
Loves me very much, supports me wholeheartedly, and I am lucky and blessed. And I know that. Mom, I want you to come to my store and see it. My mom was shaking to enter
Mm.
my store. I don't know what she expected. Apparently, she grew up in inner city Boston back in the Combat Winter Hill Gang era.
Right.
So
Yeah.
apparently she was, I don't know, expecting the Winter Hill Gang to be in the building.
Tough times
Uh,
back then.
definitely. So she walked into an Apple store. My
Right.
CEO designed the building so that his mom would be comfortable.
Mm.
And in a building that's not allowed to have natural light because, God forbid, a kid sees something or an adult who doesn't want to sees something. Um, it was incredibly well lit, glass cabinets, question and answers, people running around with iPads or tablets, interactive displays on the wall. Nobody was pushing anything. It was all there. If you wanted to ask, people would answer questions all day long.
Mm.
And she left and she said, that was not what I expected. No, no, mom, it's not. Because the story you've been told wasn't based in science. It wasn't based in reality. It wasn't based in honest experience.
Mm.
It was based in an effort to control. And so the narrative was written in the way that would get the result that they wanted. That doesn't make any sense.
Mm.
But at the time that this was occurring in the 1920s in America, we did trust our news and we didn't necessarily look any further. But when history has gone back to review, hey, why was cannabis banned? What was the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937?
Mm.
Some very interesting documentation that's been left over. And it was an effort to control a population that they didn't like.
Mm. Enter racism. The
I was
previous
going to
comment
say,
that you made. This is the
what,
connection.
what, Jeopardy? What word is that definition? What is racism?
Right.
Exactly. And there were some other political factors at play as well. There always are. Cannabis grows really easily. It's relatively inexpensive. Hell, it's a weed.
Mm.
Trees don't grow particularly inexpensively. They don't grow particularly quickly. And both products make really good paper.
Mm.
So the guy who runs the papers is invested in paper mills and plots of land. But cannabis makes cheaper paper, and not everybody has to buy from you. So what do? You eliminate the competition? You associate it with something that people are afraid of or don't understand?
Which at the time, politically speaking, racism was a rampant thing in society and culture. So it was there was a perfect scapegoat.
There you go. And you own the papers. So you can make the narrative
Mm.
fit. I think one of the biggest things that will change the concept of cannabis globally for culture is when cannabis becomes want a part of our daily conversation. Like mommies go out to have wine. Maybe mommies will go to a social bar, a social consumption bar, right? And then the second thing is when it becomes part of our day-to-day consumer consumption, YouTube, marketing, television shows, movies. My parents sat me down and made me watch a series of movies before I went to college so I would know what to expect. Okay. What did they show? They showed college parties. They showed uncomfortable situations. They never ever watch certain movies with your parents because there's nudity in them. Like, what the hell, mom, are you thinking? But they were to set me up to show me outcomes. So by the end of the day, what I understood was don't drink too much. Don't drink without a trusted friend. And if you fall asleep drunk, try to sleep on your side because if you throw up in your sleep, you're going to asphyxiate. It wasn't a great lesson, but it was I knew what to expect. I could see what alcohol did to people on the screen, and I could understand that it would make me silly or it could make me angry or it'd make me sad or make me fall asleep. But I understood what it was. On 8 o'clock p.m. sitcoms, women are drinking, men are drinking wine, they're having a beer. It's an acceptable thing to do. Cannabis doesn't have that. Yeah, there's cannabis movies. They don't count. Harold and Kumar it's a great film if that's your thing, but it doesn't really count because it's not part of the everyday. And for me, it was watching all the John Hughes films, right? So watching Emilio Estevez do backflips after smoking a quarter of a joint with 5 friends in detention in the Breakfast Club, that's not really realistic, is it? I mean, sure, there are people who are athletes who smoke marijuana before they exercise because it focuses them, but I don't think it makes them do 10 backflips across the library.
Right.
I'm not saying it can't make you feel that good. I'm just saying I don't feel like that's a normal result. That's, to me, what cannabis was growing up. It was, you're going to die. It was what happens before you get to the frying pan when your brain is on drugs. Or it's this thing that's going to make you so loopy, you're going to do 10 backflips across the library. No, not interested. So when it becomes an accepted norm, when the mommies don't go to mommy wine and book club, they go to cannabis and book club. When dad comes home and instead of having a scotch, he goes outside and has a pre-roll. That's when I think that you'll see a lot of this fear come down. And that is really due to education. You know what? Try a gummy, see what happens. Because I can almost guarantee you it's not going to be as exciting as you think it is.
Although watching Avengers just might be a tiny bit more entertaining.
Giggle a little bit more. There are worse things on the planet.
Right.
So it's really getting that. And whereas an entrepreneur now, taking my compliance and sharing it with other people, not belonging to a single company, what I find is these entrepreneurs have this passion for the plant. I can't grow the plant to save my life. I can barely grow a tomato in the summer to pick my own tomatoes. Okay. The basil grows because it's a weed and I remember to water it. Like agriculture, not my thing. And that's okay. It doesn't need to be. But there are people who can grow complicated strains that need babying and attention and they need light and they have to have X, Y, and Z and they play the Mozart and they make amazing plants and they smell, I've learned to appreciate, they smell wonderful. Not everybody can do that. But they can. And then they have a business in the most heavily regulated industry after, again, nuclear power or nuclear industry and weapons of war. No, I don't know about Canadian high schools, but we don't get Business 101 in American high schools. We don't get Business 101 in college.
Nope.
So what I do is I come in and I help them. Look, you do this. This is the part I can't do that skill. I can't take cannabis and make oil out of it. Not good oil. I mean, I could make oil out of it. I get the general concept. I'm not a complete idiot. But you can make a 90% clear oil that can become a tincture that's going to help an end of life, or it's going to enhance a party experience, or it's going to make a great salad dressing and everybody's going to chill out at Thanksgiving.
Which would be really nice for some of the families' Thanksgivings, I'm sure.
Exactly. Or but you have all of this regulatory obligation. Let me help you. Your passion for the plant. I'm a passion for organization. I have the skills and experience, and I understand it. And I can help you get where you need to be. And I can do it in a short term just to make sure that you're set up where you are, or I can be your chief compliance officer on a share basis. You pay a small fee on a monthly basis for a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 year contract, depending on what you want to do. And then you know that this is taken care of. Well, you go do what you do, which is create or transfer or sell a plant that has a really weird amount of regulation associated with it.
I love that your go-to place to fix the problem is education. You and me are very much in alignment on that idea. My son is homeschooled, for the record, and the reason I made that choice, and let me tell you, when I did make that choice, I had a lot of pushback by nearly every single person in my entire circle of friends and family, with the exception of like my dad, maybe. And the reason I did that was because first of all, I didn't have a great time in school at all for any reason. There was no good part of school for me at all. What I saw was a bunch of adults doing their job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know about you, but some days when I show up to work, whatever work is today, I'm not all the way there. I on some days I'm 30%. On good days I'm maybe 70 or 80, and on a rock star day, which happens very rarely, I'll reach that 93%. But it takes a lot to put me into 100%, and I imagine the same problem exists for other people who have taken on the job of teaching others. And so if that is the case, I don't know that I trust somebody else who is only going to show up 30% most of the time with my child's education, which I think is very, very important. I think it's very important he has an education. Now, do I agree that he needs to know the ins and outs of SOHCAHTOA, sine and tangent, algebraic formulas for the proton mass of the nucleus is the powerhouse of the cell? Probably not. I still haven't used any of that information. I don't know who does. Whoever did take it and use it, I'd love to have a comment of what job you have that actually needs that. But I digress. The idea here that it is my responsibility to teach my child. It's my responsibility to teach my child about all things, not just math and science and biology or whatever. It's about history. It's about how we got to where we are now and why that matters for where we're going in the future. And then what role do we play in contributing towards that? And those are really, really important things to teach a human being, and I think is missed in our traditional education system.
Yeah.
That
Especially
includes
in the state of Florida
like,
this week, but yes.
Yeah. Well, that includes things like cannabis or like drinking or like doing heroin. I don't think that you need to hide it. I think you need to teach about it and why doing heroin is not a good idea. We know as adults, some of us do anyway. Some of us don't. Some of us are still standing at an intersection collecting change for 4 hours until we have enough money to go and get the heroin that we need to just barely survive. Yeah. Some people are doing that right now in North America. Yes. I'm not even talking about other countries who have their own situations and problems, but it's that lack of education that I think drives that factor. And so when it comes to educating people about this thing to help reframe the way that we see it, I think we have to start somewhere else, which is doing the thing that we should have been doing over the last 100 years. Instead of regulating and hiding it, we should have been studying it. We should have been learning more about it and then taking that knowledge and teaching people. So I feel like we're very much behind the gun on that in terms of what good information is out there. I don't know about you, but I've seen that one video that circulated the internet 3 or 4 years ago when marijuana was legalized, of that guy who, I think it was Parkinson's. He was very shaky. He was like, he had a lot of tremors and they were violent, and you could tell that he was obviously in distress. And then with a little bit of CBD oil, It was
Yeah.
a matter of minutes. In like 10 or 15 minutes, his entire body had come to a calm and relaxed state. And I wonder what is that?
Yeah.
Is that a thing that has a practical application in our everyday lives to better that man's situation and quality of life? You think it's important to stand in front of that? That's the question that I ask people. So for you, do you feel the same? Is there something that we're missing in terms of what information we have to share?
Oh, absolutely. 1000%. Because of because the United States is the United States, it made this executive decision, right? We're going to control this substance. And that became the decision. And then the decision suffered from inertia. Inertia meaning nobody revisited it, nobody looked at it, nobody asked anything else. And so as the United States did its thing on a global basis, they managed to push other countries who were signing treaties with us into also banning cannabis and banning marijuana.
Mm.
Most of our major treaties have that requirement in it. That's a you sign on the dotted lines, work with the United States, you ban cannabis. That's the way it works. That's why the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, has banned cannabis, because the United States made them. They said, we're not going to give you any money. We're not going to give you any funding if you don't do this, because this is very important to us. But nobody stopped to ask why. What is it? Why do you think that this should be a Schedule 1 drug, which in your definition, next to heroin, means that there is zero medical value? And prior in the 1800s, in the early 1900s, prior to banning, there are in fact scientific studies using cannabis. And it showed for the time positive medical value. So why, when we talk about the 60s and the space race and the science taking off, why did nobody say, let's go back and look at this? Inertia. It's bad. It's always been bad. It will always be bad. And everybody agrees it's bad because the whole world says it's bad. Well, Israel didn't have that problem. So in Israel, they could study it, and they did. And a doctor in Israel who passed away recently and whose name, unfortunately, I can't recall at the moment, studied cannabis and studied the body's reaction with cannabis. And he discovered our endocannabinoid system and how cannabis and its associated terpenes, its associated properties influence that. So they were doing that. And that was in the 70s and 80s. And slowly, we've been getting some very modern, robust, if you will, scientific evidence led by anyone but us, because it's been banned here in the United States. If you are a consumer, I'm sure you're familiar with the fun of the cannabis strain names.
Yeah.
Well, there was a strain called Jerry's Folly. Jerry's Folly was named for Jerry Garcia. His followers were known cannabis users. The band is a very big advocate. There you go. Jerry's Folly. Why was it called Jerry's Folly? Because it didn't get you high. It was, without proper testing, but what we know now, a very high CBD strain.
Ooh.
Do you know what Jerry's Folly is known as today? Charlotte's Web.
No kidding.
Charlotte's Web. Yes.
I did
Named
not
for
know
the
that was
little
connected.
girl. Named for the little girl who it helped. Named for the little girl whose life it changed. Because when she was given a tincture of Jerry's Folly, it helped her seizures.
Mm.
And now, in the United States of America, there are 3, I believe, FDA-approved drugs that their core formula is cannabis. So it can't be Schedule 1 anymore. We have proved beyond a shadow of a doubt
Yeah.
that it works. There are medical values. What do you do with that? How do you fight 100 years of inertia?
It's a
You
big
have to
shift
start
this
over.
year.
You have to start over. You have to discuss it. You have to open it. You have to let it be studied. You have to believe in science, for Christ's sake, which is occasionally a difficult thing. Shouldn't be,
The
should be
last few years.
straightforward, in my opinion, but it is a difficult thing.
Yeah.
And you have to allow people to access it. Here in Massachusetts, the next big frontier is social consumption. Because right now, the only place to consume is in the privacy of your own home. And regulations say that if you're a landlord, you can ban smoking up to and including cannabis. So if you rent and your landlord says no smoking, if you smoke cannabis, you can be arrested and you will be prosecuted for using an illegal drug, even though it's legal in the state. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but welcome to the American cannabis experience. So social consumption, places for people to be able to go to consume. The original conversations about this were like, we're going to have these really tiny, dark, dank spaces that nobody can smoke in. What? What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. I've been talking to regulators and other people, and they ask my opinion, and I say, you know what I want? I want a bar. I want a place where I can go and consume. I can smoke if I want or not smoke. So have a HVAC room for smoking. That's fine. My husband has no interest. Not his thing. Not his thing. He likes a good scotch. I don't disagree. I like a nice red wine occasionally. I want to be able to go out with him where he can have a scotch, we can have a meal, I can have a gummy or a smoke. If I buy something, I want bottle service. Can you keep it until I show up next time? I don't want to have to take it home with me if I don't need to. I want to be able to play a board game, watch a game on the TV. I want to be able to hang out with people. I want to be able to bring my friend and say, look, it's not as scary as you think it is. We're going to go play board games for the night at the social consumption place. They have beer, they have food, they have wine, they have tonic water. Come hang out. Whatever your choice of evil is, come, whatever your sin is, bring it with you. That's what I want. Because why? That's what we need. Nobody has died as a direct result of consumption of cannabis. They haven't been able to prove it. Zero deaths. How many have alcohol killed? Mm-hmm. I can take my kid into a bar. I can take my kid into a liquor store. I can't pick up my medicine at a cannabis facility with anyone.
Last time I was down in Florida, this blew my mind. The first time I was there, which was like 20 years ago. It's been a while, but because I'm Canadian, so it's very different here. But when I went there, they had liquor in the the fridge, the cooler at the gas station.
In Texas?
In Florida.
No, in Texas.
Yeah.
They you can buy at Home Depot or Lowe's, you can buy like a pop-up garage, which is mostly just a roof.
Yeah.
In Texas, that they have pop-up garages that are liquor stores, and you drive through them. You drive your car into the liquor store. You tell the attendant, I need a bottle of wine. I need a 12-pack of Coors. I need X, Y, and Z. They run around because everything is on the walls of the garage. They put it in your car. You hand them their credit card, and you just go for a drive. You don't even have to get out of the car.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I think is just so crazy about how the way that we look at things and how that is so easily influenced by the social code, by the way that we all have to agree. And we saw this play out in such it's an embarrassing time of history for us to have gone through the last 3 or 4 years. And I don't have a lot of people that believe the same things that I believe about the COVID-19 thing and about masks and about science and about research and about all these other things. What I would make the argument of is that it's important for us all to have some degree of responsibility over our opinions. If you're going to have an opinion over something, that's okay. Like, I'm not saying you can't think about things, but what I would make the argument of is that so many people are in pursuit of being right with such limited amounts of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And I think that way of thinking is what has caused us to be in such a problematic culture around these types of things. And it does raise some serious things around addiction and all that kind of thing too. And I think that that's really important. We can't hide the elephants that are in the room. We definitely need to address them and talk about them. And in order to do that, though, we need to be in pursuit of trying to be right. We need to be in pursuit of finding what right is. And I think collectively, if we all took on or adapted that way of thinking, we'd be able to make some progress here. And it might not be fast. It might not be a tremendous amount of progress, but it would be progress nonetheless. And I still think that a 1% shift in the right direction is still a shift in the right direction. And so what you're saying with the having it become a part of the social norm, just like it is for us to have drinks. I was just watching Suits the other night, and it's a common practice for them to get to the end of the day and pull out a bottle of whiskey and have a glass of whiskey. These social norms are what we need to be communicating to people. But then we run into the issue of, well, some people aren't in the bracket of what we'll call the social normal, in that they may have had traumatic experiences. They may be self-medicating. They may not know, but what do we do to address that sort of thing? What do we do to address the proverbial elephant that's in the room in terms of how we relate what cannabis is to what we relate it to things like tobacco or drinking or doing drugs?
First of all, you have to study it. You can't isolate it. We've spent 100 years attempting to isolate it. We've failed. I would like to say we have failed loud for the people in the back. So that's not working, right? Okay, let's try something new. Let's actually look at it. Let's study it. Let's understand it. Smoking cannabis is not smoking tobacco. It is smoking. It is inhaling things into your lungs, but cannabis was never treated like tobacco. And so far, nobody said, let's make cannabis more addictive. Let's make people want it all day, every day, 12 times a day. And let's make it so addictive that they wake up in the middle of the night and they go out and have a cigarette. And then because they're so damn tired, they set themselves on fire and they burn down their house, which has happened with tobacco. So let's not fearmonger. Unfortunately, that's going to happen because that's media. Mm-hmm. Let's not fearmonger. Let's study and let's ask intelligent questions like, were we right in our assumption that it has no medical value properties? Because it does. We've, at least from my perspective, the United States has said that 3 times because it has 3 different cannabis-based drugs that are for seizures and cancer. But we've said it does have some medical values. Great. What else does it do? One of the things we know about hemp, which by the way is marijuana, but it just sounds nicer when you say it's hemp, is that the plant itself pulls disturbances out of the soil. The plant likes bad shit. I don't know why. It's a weed, so it sucks everything out of the soil. Planting hemp can take destroyed soil or contaminated soil and help to decontaminate it. Well, isn't that interesting? We've got something that grows like a weed, is perfectly happy in regular sunlight and water, doesn't really need a lot of attention paid to it, and it decontaminates soil, and we've decided that we're going to take it off the face of the planet because people might giggle when they smoke it? Like, really? Okay, because our environment's just so great today. We have to question what we think that we know, and then we have to not make assumptions. We have to examine it and take those practices. And guess what? Science is evolving. It's a living thing. Just like as a business owner, your risk is constantly evolving. It's a living thing. And that means what we know today can be different tomorrow because we've learned a new way to either ask the question or test the assumption. That's okay. That's great. That's wonderful. I grew up hearing on the news that eating eggs would kill me. They would give me high cholesterol and I would die. And I have family heart disease in my history. big ass family heart disease, like heart attacks at the age of 60, keeling over, dying, never getting to retire level of horrible history. Admittedly, I was very impressionable. I was, like 8, 10 when these articles were coming out. But it is an act of will for me to eat an egg. But guess what science has said in the 30 years since that first conversation has gone out? We got it wrong.
Well, and how much of that was a result of that thing we were mentioning before, the corporate wars? This is such an interesting part of, we like to look at the world through our own frame, how we have been taught to believe. And a lot of us have a Judeo-Christian kind of whatever background of like morals and values, like thou shalt not kill, don't be envious, don't steal from each other. Like we all still have those values, whether you practice religion or not, but those are our guidelines. That's how we live, right? Simultaneously, we all acknowledge that the leaders of the big corporations are evil men who have these satanic rituals in the background. And so and that's a whole different thing. We have acknowledged that there are people who don't play by those rules.
Yeah.
But then we take the information that those people who don't play by the rules provide us as rule of law, of absolute, that is the 100% truth. Just because of a lab coat, or because of a suit and a pedestal in front of you and a microphone, all of a sudden your word is more valuable than anybody else's. And I don't care what anybody says about doing your own research. You're not a scientist. You can't do research. You want to know what science is? The act of science is having a guess, forming a hypothesis,
testing,
trying things in a controlled environment, and then recording those results and how they are different or the same to what your hypothesis was. That's the act of science. A scientist himself, if they're about to perform an experiment on a thing, will go back and read the publications of all the other experiments that have been performed. And so that is a part of their research. Yes. And so if we want to form educated opinions about things like cannabis, it's our responsibility to go and read these publications, because like you have alluded to, they exist. They are there, and they are publicly available for you to consume should you so choose to.
Yes.
But if you want to believe somebody who doesn't play by the rules, who puts a headline out about that thing, then that shows the level of involvement or intelligence that I think you have when it comes to participating in some kind of dialogue, especially dialogue that is so important as the very construct of our culture and society, how we got where we are. The reason we think the things that we think is because some marketing engine told us to think those things back when a paper company wanted to preserve themselves by outlawing another company. It's so interesting because you take the same thing. Insurance wasn't always the way that it was.
Right.
Insurance isn't there to protect you. It's a business. But the marketing engine has told you it's there to protect you. And so here's what happens. They collect data. Over the last 100 years that insurance companies have existed, they've collected data on you. And not just you, who you are, who you associate with, and every single person that you've ever known, they know. And they know a lot about them. They know their complete medical history, because if you want life insurance, you got to go get that. And then you give it to them. And so now from that information, they run it through their computers and algorithms and a bunch of other pre-calculated equations. And they go, we know that we can profit $3 million from you between now and when you're 63 and die. They know when you're going to die. And they know that when you die, your term insurance isn't going to be there anymore. You didn't get whole life insurance, and so you're not protected. And so they never have to pay you. So they're in the business of collecting your money. And here's what's worse about it. Some industries like that have made it so that the laws make it so that you can't function in society without participating in it. For example, if you want to get your license and drive a car around, you have to have it registered and insured. And to have it insured, the insurance companies made that law. Yeah. So
I am not the world's biggest, I'm not a Tesla stan.
Right.
But one of the reasons that Tesla struggles to get a car to its end consumer is because in the 30s, the big three established the laws about how cars could be sold so that they controlled it.
Right.
And those laws have been on the books. Again, inertia. We've never gone back and looked at why was this written the way it was written? Does it require an update? So Tesla has a showroom that doesn't have cars because the way they want to sell doesn't meet the rules of selling a vehicle to a consumer that were written in 1930. What? Really? We have to do this because somebody wanted to protect a monopoly in 1930? Can we talk about this, ladies and gentlemen? Please? It's 2023. Why can't I go online? Why do I have to talk to a salesman for 12 hours? Why? Why can you not just give me a price and I say, I want to pay X. Can you meet that or not? Yes, no? Okay, I'll go find somebody else. Like, why is it this 12-hour song and dance? Because somebody codified it into law and nobody's gone back to look at it. Isn't that insane? Very much so. Inertia. To the degree that, and we're tipping on the edge of this tinfoil hat thing, and so I'm gonna teeter precariously on the edge, and then we'll wrap this up. These companies create the environment for us to participate in, and then we have no choice but to participate in it. For example, a car used to only cost a couple $1,000s, but that's because we had to actually save money to pay for it. So they had to make it achievable for us. Enter in the banking system and financing, and okay, you can buy that $2,000 car still, but we'll do it over 12 installments over the course of a year, if that's more convenient for you. And we'll charge you just a little bit for the convenience. Yeah, just a little bit. And that's okay. I can get behind that. That totally makes sense. It doesn't cost us any more to make cars than it did back then. In fact, a lot of those materials are much cheaper now because we're using different things. So even if by the light of inflation, cars did go up by 10 times and now they do really cost $20,000, tell me why we're still paying $50,000 for them. This is where it gets interesting. We're not paying $50,000 for a car. We're signing up to continue to pay a company for the convenience of renting a car from them, because what happens if you don't make the payment? They take the car back, you don't get your money back, and you never get a chance to have that car again because they put a note on your credit that says you can't. They do the same thing with the housing. They make the housing so you can build a house for $20,000. You know that? I watched somebody do it on YouTube. And he detailed the exact process of how to do it. Sure, the land was a little bit expensive and it's inconvenient to live in that place, but nonetheless, it didn't cost him $500,000. And so who we're paying that $500,000 to? We're paying it to the banks, the financing, to rent it. Because what happens? It's not your house yet. It's not your house until you've completed those payments. It's the bank's house and you are renting it from them, and they are a terrible landlord, because if you miss a payment, they are taking it back from you, and then they are bringing the law in to kick you out, and then you are out on the street and you're all the money that you put up there. And so who's really taking the risk? It's not the banks. They're not taking a risk on you. They know you can't afford it. They know they're going to take it back, and they're going to get the money that they get out of you to resell it later. And so these are the systems that we're in. And I love that the whole conversation that we've had has kind of circled around this idea of things are broken. We all can identify that the things that were set up before were broken. We've trusted them. We did our best because we had no choice. I'm a millennial kid. I got two boomer parents, and they told me that, it might not work the way you think. College might not be a great idea. You better get out there in the real world and figure something out, because if you're not going to do it here and you're not going to do it in college, you're going to be on your own. And so luckily for me, I don't know about your experience, but luckily for me, my parents were able to guide me in finding where my place was in this world. And trust me, becoming a YouTube podcast host was not on the list of things that I could do 20 years ago when I was graduating high school. So thank God I didn't follow the system, and I have the flexibility and freedom to do whatever I want. But that does call into question what is it that you think, Melissa, that we can do to undo the damage of the broken systems that we're all facing? Because I think that you are part of the I'll call it the team of people right now that are
doing the work that's necessary to help renovate, at least. And if we can't bulldoze the whole thing and put up a new one in its place, we're stuck renovating. And so, what, Melissa, do you think is the best course of action in terms of what needs to be renovated in our functioning systems?
Question. Ask questions. Question everything. Why is it the way it is? Is that relatable to me today? Does it fit the needs that exist today? Is there a way to build a better mousetrap? And then when you ask the questions and you solicit answers, right? Because answers are going to come from different things, different institutions, different attitudes. The winners write the history books. Then look at them and think about them. And then if you really think that change needs to happen, then you need to decide that if it changes something that you're willing to make. And if you can say yes, then you need to go out and be an advocate. Changing people's thoughts on cannabis and helping people who are passionate about the plant and who are essentially accidental business owners and making it easy for them to be successful by taking the burden of risk management and compliance, or giving them tools to handle the burden of risk management and compliance, is my way of advocating and showing every day that this plant has value, it is safe, and that the public should not fear it. And it's one single action. But if you're not going to question and you're not going to assess and you're not going to try, then you are stuck with the definition of insanity, which is repeating the same thing and hoping for a different outcome. You have to try and you have to ask the question first. And it's okay if you didn't know that there was a question to ask, right? Because you can't always know that. As a child, you are subject to the whims of those around you, right? They decide for what you can know and what you cannot know. So that's okay. But if something doesn't sit right with you and you are in a position to ask the question, well, why do we do it that way? I don't know. Maybe you'll find a really good answer. And maybe that means you'll have the next Tesla business, or maybe it means you'll be opening a cannabis lounge, or maybe it means that you're going to have this podcast thing and make connections. It's all there. It really is all there, but it starts with asking a question, in my opinion.
Very poignant. I think that is super valuable, especially in the environment that we're in right now, the climate of how we're all adjusting to this constant and expedient change to the very fabric that we know to be true. It's tough, it's challenging, and the ones that have boldly taken it on, like yourself, I think that's admirable, and you're doing incredible work. So on behalf of everybody, I think I'm saying thank you for that, first of all. You've been very generous with your time today, and I am excited about this conversation because it's one of the few times that I think there was an opportunity for an intellectual conversation about what most people would very immediately dismiss as, we'll call it, conspiracy. The act of somebody somewhere conspiring to achieve an outcome that is desirable for themselves and not for others, perhaps, or maybe for others in their mind. After all, it's the people that do crazy things think that they're doing them for good. So
Definitely.
I think it's a great place to cap things off. So thank you very much for being on the show today, Melissa. If there was somebody wanted to get in touch with you, to work with you, or to pick your brain or have a conversation, is there a way for somebody to do that?
Absolutely. Please email me, Melissa, first name, one L, two S's, MELISSA at 1620partners.com. And you can find me there, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And I have absolutely enjoyed this conversation. It's been delightful. So thank you for allowing me to join you.
It was my absolute pleasure. I'd love to leave the listeners and viewers with one final word from you. And normally the question is related to a bit of a different discussion. So I'm going to try to reframe this a little bit here. If there was something that you could share with people who were sitting on the fence in terms of where they see themselves in this, in the inertia, in the momentum, and you wanted to tip them over to a more curious side, what would you say to that group of people?
Oh, what an interesting question. I think I would ask them, well, why don't you want to know? What's your fear? What is the false expectation that is appearing real, that is holding you back from asking a question? Nobody's going to take away your birthday if you ask a question. It's yours. It wholly belongs to you. Like, your mom's not in the room, your dad's not in the room, grandma and grandpa aren't here. There's nobody judging you. Why, again, what is that fear, that false expectation appearing real is holding you back?
Love that. Go bravely into that and explore it and see what you find on the other side of it. I think that's a very powerful message. So again, Melissa, thank you so much. If you want to get in touch with me or Mitch, it's email theperspective@gmail.com. Otherwise, that is it for this episode, and we will see you in the next one.